2 days after Governor Weld introduced the bill, lawmakers voted themselves a $16,000 a year pay raise that goes into effect in January.
Followed by rapid reactions, envy.
But I wish I had a 55% pay raise.
Anger.
I don't think that they should set their own pay.
Even grudging admiration.
I think anybody that would not vote themselves a 55% raise would be an idiot. You do it yourself, would you not?
Soon the talk shows and the headlines targeted the governor, and he felt the pressure.
The first question is whether it is referendum-proof, and we don't know the answer.
If it is referendum-proof, where do you start from there?
I'm going to have to think about it.
Perhaps the reaction of the press the day of the hearing should have tipped the governor off to this week's fury. As they pursued him onto a State House elevator, and then up the State House stairs. Tonight, as he plays Hamlet on the pay raise bill, perhaps he wishes the political landscape could return to the date of November 15th, 1994, when he had this to say about the prospect of a legislative pay raise.
Bottom line, no initiative from your part to raise salaries for legislators.
I don't think so.
Are dreams of the White House mixed up in this dilemma at the State House? News Center 5's Kirby Perkins, who's been covering this story, joins us now from the State House. Kirby, what does this do to the governor's presidential agenda if he has one?
Well, that's, of course, the question. Does he indeed have one? And by the way, I don't think there is a firm and fast answer to that because, of course, the answer to that has to come from him. And my guess, having talked to some of the people who are close to him, is that that answer definitely has not been made. What it does do is that it puts him into a very difficult position. He would love to have cordial relations with the legislature over the next 2 years. What governor wouldn't? That's the only way you can get things through. Even if you are a confirmed Republican ideologue, you still have to get things through a Democratic legislature. So if he could give them a pay raise and get some things done that are part of his agenda that might help him run for president, why wouldn't he do it?
So
well,
that's putting
backfired on him in a bit.
That's putting the best face on what people term deal making. I mean, people talk cynically about a behind closed doors deal that's been cut here. But you're saying that you know, it makes sense if you're a Republican governor and you've got a Democratic legislature.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, this man doesn't want to sit for 2 years and be paralyzed because, of course, even if he's not running for president, he wants to get something through. Now, what some people are saying he should have realized, and I'm, by the way, with them in this regard, is that when he starts doing this with the legislature, he has to remember that he's not dealing with people who are his kindred spirits. They've been there, they're from a different party, and they indeed did change that which he sent to them. They turned it to an appropriations bill. Now, Chairman Finneran will be on later on and will explain why precisely he believes that had to be done, but the political effect of that is to make the populace believe that it makes it very hard to repeal it because they can't do it by a strict referendum. They would have to put an initiative on the ballot in order to do it. That takes far more signatures, and also the Supreme Judicial Court has ruled in a previous case that it wouldn't be allowed anyway. So there are some people who think they're making it repeal-proof by doing this.
Kirby, if the governor signs it, then does he not look like something of a patsy, like he's been had here, or is he in too deep now to go back?
Well, that, of course, is the $64 million question for the governor. And I think, by the way, he currently has his own people reviewing it to see if there are any, quote, legal problems with it. I think if he had his druthers, and this comes from having to talk to some of his people, what he would like to be able to do is to veto a portion of this. That is to say, the portion of it that made it difficult for the people to repeal it. If he could do that, I think he would be a happy camper. The problem they're having is that I don't think they can find a legal way to do that. So when he gets back in town tomorrow, he's still going to be faced with that very difficult question. Does he continue on the path that he charted for himself, which is to sign it, even given this change, or does he now do a bit of an about-face? And that's going to be a very tough call, both politically and on the merits.
And finally, is there a feeling that at the State House that the governor got out on this limb all by himself?
Oh, I think that's absolutely the case. I've talked to several of his advisors going all the way back to his first campaign, and they say this is absolutely a given with Bill Weld. That when he's feeling good about himself, when he thinks everything's going well, he doesn't necessarily seek the advice of people that he normally seeks, and he does what he thinks is in his best interest individually, keeping his own counsel. Some people say, by the way, he didn't make a mistake on this, but it was not having the benefit of the advice of countless advisors. He says, and I think you can take him on the merits on this one, he made this decision all by his lonesome.
All right. Kirby Perkins from News Center 5, thank you for being with us. Up next, underpaid or underproductive, debating those State House salaries when we come back.
Coming up next, the Finneran-Anderson debate, pros and cons of the pay raise.
With us now, a woman who is thinking ahead. Barbara Anderson already has one eye on repealing any salary increase at the State House. Ms. Anderson is, of course, Director of Citizens for Limited Taxation. Also with us is House Ways and Means Chairman Tom Finneran, who is certain there is a way and a will for the pay raise. Representative Finneran, let me ask you this. If the public is as angry as they seem to be, as outraged as they seem to be, is this a case of the legislature thumbing its nose at the people?
No, absolutely not, Mary. I don't think that point could be made with any type of legitimacy. What we really have is a situation in which the governor of the Commonwealth, a consistent external critic and observer of government through his in his earlier life, has now had the benefit of working very closely with a cooperative legislature over the past 4 years. We've made enormous progress addressing a number of issues that challenge the citizens of this Commonwealth, and he has looked and studied it and decided that on his own. He filed a bill that said both the constitutional officers and the legislators deserve some adjustment in a salary that has not been increased or reviewed in 12 years.
All right, let me ask Barbara Anderson about that. Has the governor betrayed those who feel that he started this? After all, it was his idea. It came from his desk.
We expect the governor to protect us from these things, not do them. And what Representative Finneran just said is not true. They did have a pay raise in 87, 88. The voters repealed it. So they shouldn't be basing it upon an inflation index since 83. They should at least start after the last pay raise repeal, or perhaps in 1990 when they finally did start to behave themselves rather than driving the Commonwealth into the ground the way they did in the 1980s.
Look, that's easy, Mary, for Barbara to say, but obviously it's her patron saint who filed the bill. She can't avoid that fact. The fact is that there has not been an adjustment at all. The further fact is that it is simply based upon inflation with no other type of increase whatsoever. And the ultimate challenge that everybody should ask themselves, including Barbara Anderson, and maybe she could answer the question, is can she identify one other citizen in the Commonwealth that has gone for 12 years without an adjustment? Now, she applauded, and almost everybody else applauded, when we made an identical adjustment
Mr.
for
Chairman,
judges.
you had an adjustment in 1987, 88. You did it again in a way that outraged the voters. The voters repealed it, so you're certainly not entitled to go back to 1983 in the period that the voters repealed it for. But let me ask you a question, Mr. Chairman, because I know you won't lie, so I'm going to ask this very carefully so you can't wiggle.
Sure.
Were you aware, when you changed this bill, that you were making it referendum-proof?
Barbara, you know what I was aware of. It's an appropriation because that's the only way you can get money into any account in the State House.
That's not the question, Mr. Chairman. The question is, were you aware,
Barbara,
when you
can
changed
continue
the
to address this
bill
issue as you want.
that you knew that it would not...
This is a great issue for Barbara Anderson to try to raise money and
Mr. Chairman,
agitate her membership.
were you aware when you changed the bill that it would make a referendum-proof and not even give your constituents a chance
Barbara,
to vote on this pay raise?
Perhaps you'd give me the legitimate opportunity to respond.
Please
My
do.
constituents know who I am and how I vote, and we'll see what they think about this 2 years hence. I'm delighted to respond to not only your questions, but to their questions.
The answer then is yes, because you would have told the truth.
There is only one way.
Representative Finneran, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this in a different way.
Go ahead.
How can you, the changes in the bill came down with your signature on them. How can you defend tinkering with that bill? How do you defend tinkering with that bill?
Mary, I'm having a little trouble with the broadcast. Could you just repeat that? I apologize.
The changes came down with your signature on them.
Yes.
How do you defend tinkering with that bill?
No, I'm very straightforwardly. I made the adjustment. The buck stops at Ways and Means. We have to look at the accounts, Mary, and if there's not money in the account to accommodate the change that's being made, there's only one way to get money in. You have to do it by an appropriation. Barbara Anderson knows that. Anybody who has observed the process up here for more than 1 month knows that. And I don't apologize. I'm not defensive about it whatsoever. It's absolutely the most straightforward way available.
Were you aware when you did
it's
it
the
that
only
it would
way
make it
available.
referendum-proof?
Was I aware?
The answer is yes, isn't it? Because you won't lie and say no. So the fact that you're not answering it means you were aware it would make a referendum-proof.
No, Barbara, this is what I've said repeatedly. I'll say it one more time. Perhaps you'll catch it this time. Put 5 attorneys in the room, including the Attorney General of the Commonwealth. You'll have 5 different opinions. I happen to think that it does make it referendum-proof, but not obviously initiative-proof. So you have your opportunity, Barbara, to say this.
All
You
right.
can set the salary at whatever you want.
There's a lot of areas to discuss here. Let's just move on for just a second.
Mary, could I pose a question back for Barbara?
Go ahead.
At what level of salary would Barbara Anderson stop being a constant critic and decide to come up and play a positive role? Will she run for the state legislature and give us the benefit of her ideas at $30,000, at $40,000,
enough?
or at
Is it-
$5,000?
is
What
30,000?
level is it legitimate?
Back when I actually thought I could work with you people to make things work in this Commonwealth, I thought you might have been worth another $5,000. Because of the way you behaved over the last several weeks, I think I and everybody else think you ought to be fired, never mind giving a pay raise at all. But I think most people would be
postponement of the
willing to see you
employer
get a
mandate is
$5,000.
meaningless. The unemployment insurance freeze is meaningless. The health care reforms are all meaningless, Barbara, because you're agitated about one vote.
What
Out of
healthcare
hundreds that are
reforms?
cast, you want to
What
focus
welfare
on
reforms?
one.
Let's go
What
back.
criminal justice
Let's
reform?
go back to the salary issue. Most people, most fair-minded people, I'd like to know, Barbara Anderson, you do hear from a lot of people, is the outrage over the salary itself, or is the outrage over the way it was done? In other words, would fair-minded...
I would say the anger
comes
is-
from, you're asking me the question? The anger comes, they're angry about the amount of the raise, they're outraged over the way it was done, and they are beyond rage about the fact that they turned it into a bill that could not be repealed with a referendum.
I'm in partial agreement with Barbara. The anger, I would agree with Barbara, is probably more over the process or the appearance of the process. I don't believe that they're as angry over the amount, because when people hear, and they generally don't get it over the din that's been raised and the uproar that's been created by folks like Barbara and the talk show hosts, when they hear that the salary hasn't been adjusted in 12 years,
Excuse me, it has been adjusted. You're not telling the truth about that.
One citizen in the
And we are
Commonwealth.
not creating this outrage. You created this outrage by the way you did it. You
Mary,
did it,
you can't
we
find
did
a
not.
retiree, you can't find a family that's on public assistance, you can't find anyone at all in the whole world of work in the Commonwealth who's gone for 12 years without an adjustment. And the same principle that the governor applied to
There
the
are human
judges...
service providers who are making the amount of your pay raise.
This is not the last debate we are going to hear on this.
It certainly is.
Chairman Finneran, thank you for being with us. Barbara Anderson, thank you for being with us, and we're going to keep a close eye on what the governor does in coming days. I know you're getting a lot of phone calls, and Representative Finneran is defending his position. Mike Barnacle with his own Beacon Hill proposal when we come back.